Hello, and welcome to today's Axiad webinar, MFA for Phishing Resistance, Strong Authentication for Everyone. We chose that title very deliberately, and here's why. It may be that you're already using some hardware-based authenticators like YubiKeys or IDEMIA smart cards, along with strong credentials like TLS certificates or FIDO passkeys. But if you're like most of our customers, most of Axiad customers, you're using them for special cases, maybe for your CEO or other executives or heads of departments or privileged IT staff. But what would it look like if you could provide strong phishing resistant authentication everywhere in your organization? And what would it look like to provide strong authentication for everyone? What would happen to your overall security and compliance posture if you could provide strong authentication to everyone without any interruption in productivity? Hi, everyone. My name is Andrew Wang, and I'm a product and security evangelist here at Axiad. Joining me today is Michael Thelander, our Director of Product Strategy. For the next 35 minutes or so, we're going to explore how to make strong authentication ubiquitous throughout your organization. You can use the function on the right top panel to ask these questions or answer polls. We'll review them at the end of this webinar. With that, please take it away, Michael.
Thanks, Andrew. Thanks very much. And everybody that joined live, really appreciate you joining, whether it's 10 in the morning Pacific time or whether it's 1 in the afternoon on the East Coast. Thanks for taking some time out of your day. Like Andrew said, we're going to try to keep this right to 35 minutes. 35 minutes, I think, is a really perfect time to try to get some meat, try to get something concrete and some ideas across, whether those are technical or business related. And honestly, today, they're a little bit of a mix of both. Today, we're going to talk in 3 areas. You almost, every time that you talk about authentication, you have to talk about why passwords are sort of dying out and expiring and why passwords are going the way of the dinosaurs. It's kind of a given. So I'm not going to spend a ton of time on it, but we are going to talk a little bit about what that means and the position that puts us in this sort of hybrid world where we have to deal with both for a while. And then we're going to talk about what actually defines a strong credential. When this whole thing comes down to phishing resistance or strong MFA or using strong credentials, strong is not an arbitrary word. Strong is a very well-defined word. And we're going to talk about what that means and how you can manage it. Ultimately, to get to the underline everyone, the strong authentication, phishing resistance for _everyone really comes down to something that's been in the news a lot lately, which is operational efficiency, right? Like, how do we take something we know how to do and scale it to 10 times as many end users, to 10 times as many endpoints, to 10 times faster deployment. And that's what operational efficiency is really all about. So we're going to get into the first part first, obviously, and talk about the death of passwords. And I sometimes say, again, I'm going to skip through this really fast because I think we all have a good history of passwords. The longest, slowest death ever. We just came back from the RSA conference. And I remember in the RSA conference of 2004, Bill Gates predicts the death of passwords. Well, that's 21 years ago, guys, right? That statement is old enough to go into a bar and buy a drink now. So what has happened in the intervening words? And we knew years, I should say. And then, and we knew that, like, you know, there were alternatives, but they were inconvenient and they were insecure. They weren't working very well. And I put this note in here just because it reminds me that, again, how long passwords have been around. The sort of the godfather of passwords, Fernando Corbado from MIT, who kind of invented the password, the username password combination and the processing, workflow to enable password-based authentication, passed away back in 2019. So a lot of things have kind of changed, and we get it to today. And just a news point from last year, the numbers are staggering now. Like, why are we getting out of passwords? We've created so many of them in the last 21 years, in the last 2 decades, basically. There's so many available in the dark web. The RockU distribution, the RockU 2024 distribution, should not have surprised anybody last year, in middle of last year in July, when we saw this sort of conglomeration of a bunch of different breaches and a bunch of different repositories from different passwords and credentials. But 10 billion passwords and credentials available on the dark web, that's sort of staggering. It obviously adds urgency to this, which is a transition that we're in. We're in this transition, and I think everybody knows that what we mean MFA, multi-factor authentication, is using some combination of knowledge factors and inherence factors, the things that you inherently are. We'll talk about this a little bit more later, along with possession factors, things like credentials, like hardware devices, like tokens. And this is the world that we have been in, where the center of gravity was really around knowledge factors for forever, whether it's passwords or passphrases, and then starting to get influence from behavioral and situational signals going into our authentication. This is the world we're in now. And I honestly believe, I think the premise behind this presentation and any others that we do is that the center of gravity has now shifted. There will probably always be a requirement for some systems, legacy systems, to have knowledge-based authentication, whether it's a password or a passphrase. Obviously, inherence factors will continue to have their role, especially in mobile workflows and those kind of scenarios. But the center of gravity is really moving to possession factors. That's our basic premise. And then it comes down to, well, how are we going to manage that? Because basically there are two kinds of credentials now. There's either strong credentials, using strong credentials, as we'll discuss in this session, or we have to assume that everything else is compromised. We know that stolen credentials are super cheap, $10 a piece. If we want to get them on a dark web, we know that they're involved in 80, depends on which source you look at. The Verizon data breach report says 80% of all attack vectors are web app based attacks based on stolen credentials. We also know that cyber security budgets are going to continue to increase, but they're totally out of sort of balance with, the cost of actually buying credentials or even executing credential stuffing attacks or password spraying attacks or any of the things that we've been dealing with really for the last 10 years, right? But
To watch the full video, click the link below to our Bright Talk channel. For more Axiad content, click subscribe.